Do we need to do some like motivational music beforehand?
I've already done yoga this
You've
morning,
already
mate.
done the yoga beforehand. We'll lift the
Yeah, we're
arms in
doing
the air.
yoga at 8 o'clock.
You got to do the positive affirmations of
The
lift your
T
hands.
pose.
Is it a T pose?
That's asserting dominance.
I thought there was this one. This is.
That's probably a positive one.
Do they not come hand in hand? You either get one or the other. You can either be assertive or positive today. What do you want to be?
Yeah, exactly. And it just maybe if you like that, that's like assertive positive, and that's assertive negative. I don't know.
No, we don't like on the fence thinking here at BlackCurve. You either pick one or the other.
There's no grey.
There's no it depends. There's no caveating.
Maybe, bloody hell.
Ding ding. I should just sing the theme tune, shouldn't I? We should know it.
Right, the theme
Ding
tunes.
ding 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 ding. This is eCommerce Matters. Hello, this is eCommerce Matters, brought to you by BlackCurve. We help e-commerce businesses make pricing decisions. In today's episode, we're answering the question, is it better to increase or decrease your prices? I'm joined once again by my glamorous sidekick, Dr. Rob Horton, the product director and our superstar mathematician, and I'm Philip Huthwaite, founder of BlackCurve. So without further ado, here we go.
I feel like I need to interject immediately. I'm a physicist, not a mathematician.
It's all the same thing, surely,
it's
is
really not. My level of rigour is not the same as a mathematician.
Okay, we'll have to record that again. Shall we go back and do the...
Yeah, run it back.
I'll snip it back in post, don't worry. So, shall we dive straight in? I think, everyone knows we're in lockdown. Everyone knows we're in sunny Hampstead. Everyone knows the sun is shining. It is sunny. It's not raining. So we're looking at the question, is it better to increase or decrease prices? And I thought it might be worth us starting with a bit of theory behind it. So, where would you think we'd like to start there? Would you like to start there, Rob, and go through why the theory of potentially actually decreasing prices might make sense?
Yeah, that's a good place to start. It's our old buzzword bingo friend, price elasticity. So really, when you're talking about increase or decrease in a price, you're trying to find the point in the marketplace where you can maximize either revenue or profitability or sales volume, depending on what you're trying to do. And so you're trying to move towards the point that maximizes that. Now, price elasticity tells us that the price and volume are inversely related, right? If you decrease the price, volume should go up. And if you increase the price, volume should go down. It makes sense, right? Charge more, less people want to buy it. Charge less, more people might want to buy it. What that means when you're kind of trying to find that efficient point in the market, that actually a price decrease is likely to have an associated increase in volume, whereas a price increase is likely to have an associated decrease in volume. So if you're then looking at the change in revenue or profitability, one of them's got a positive change in volume and one of them's got a negative change in volume. Now, right, you've got two signs. You're decreasing the price and you're increasing the volume, so surely it should cancel out. Like, not really, because the magnitude of the volume decrease that you can get from a price increase is often far greater than the volume than the gain that you'd get from the increase in price, if that makes sense. Whereas if you go down the other end and you decrease the price slightly, you can get a massive spike in volume. So really the issue is actually that it's not a nice curve that you can optimize like you can expect. It's actually got these kind of steps or discontinuities as you kind of trip over competitors in the marketplace and all the rest of it.
Well, I think we've had a good start. That's a solid start. I think you can drop the mic now, can't you, there, Rob? After that explanation. So shall we go through? Should we tackle it in turn? Shall we look at what it means to increase prices, then look at what it means to decrease prices? I think just to sort of hammer the point home. So,
yeah,
if we increase price, okay, what? To a certain extent, what's the potential of increasing prices?
Well, let me flip it back, because you're someone who's worked in pricing for a long time.
Hang on, I asked the questions here, Rob.
Yeah, I know, right? It's the key. But what as a business owner, right? what are you trying to do if you increase your price?
Well, fundamentally, I'm trying to grow. It depends what my business objective is, right? So, which I think is a valuable question. But fundamentally, I'm trying to grow revenue, grow profitability. Typically, that's what a business owner is looking to do.
But are you trying to increase volume? I guess it would be my question.
Yes, if I felt that would support my business objective.
Mm-hmm. But what I'm getting at is that often when you make a price increase, you're looking to maintain volume, right?
Correct.
So really what you're trying to do is harvest that delta or the difference in price on each unit. So if I'm charging £1 for something and then realize I can charge a £1.50, I'm making 50p more per unit, but I'm not expecting volume to change at all, right? Realistically, because I might expect it to go down when I shouldn't expect it to go up, because price elasticity or market theory or whatever you want to call it tells you that shouldn't happen. So then conversely, if I'm making a price decrease, I'm actually looking to alter volume, right? I'm turning the other dial. And so what I'm saying is that, all right, I might charge 50p less, but I think I can sell 10, 20%, 30% more units by doing that. And that means that actually you have a higher ceiling in terms of what you can earn. I think realistically, because you've got the multiplier of the volume play rather than just taking the kind of delta on the increase.
Yeah, I mean, I suppose it depends. So if you're increasing the price of the product, hopefully the decision's been made that, as you say, that's not gonna impact your volume, so your volume's gonna stay the same. And hopefully that's been made that if you are gonna see a degradation in volume, the degradation in volume again is gonna be minimal, and the increase in price and the delta between the old and the new is going to justify that decrease. Mm-hmm. I suppose to overlay onto that if the whole market, however, is going up as well, that's a reason to increase price at the same time, is it not?
Yeah, but that's kind of what you were saying, in that if the market is moving to the right, I say to the right, but let's get distributions in my brain. But if the
as his hand moves left across my screen.
Yes.
Yes, you're a weather presenter now.
Sunny Hampstead. If the market's moving up in price, then you're not going to lose volume because that's a rebalancing of the entire system. So there's two things going on there. You've got trying to fight. If you assume your market is in a steady state or is stable, what happens if you decrease a price? That's what price elasticity really tells you about. Mm-hmm. And then what you've said is, what if the market's changing? Mm-hmm. And then actually you're in a non-equilibrium system as it readjusts. So that's a completely different process. And price elasticity is, I guess it's a first order approximation to that, but like it's probably not going to do you very good, because all your models or your understanding is built on the old market. We spoke about this before, right? You're moving to a new one. A good example of this is what happened at the start of lockdown. And actually what's happening at the other side is we kind of smugly predicted. We were talking about this earlier, but supply chain issues, everything moves up in price because it's harder to get hold of goods. It's a different market environment. Come out the other side, things ease up, stores open again, everything comes back down, and then, as we also said, things went too far and now they're bouncing back again. It's analogous, and they might actually come. The interesting thing is they come back and they might have to go back further down if tuning. But so for me, that's kind of the difference with a price increase or price decrease. If you're in a growthy market, it should be, increase prices, go nuts, right? Or if the market forces you driving elsewhere. If you're in a steady state market, price increases are, maybe we'll get onto this in a minute, are actually incredibly risky because of the associated volume reduction, in that you have to, in effect, calculate the expected value of whether it's worth making that price increase.
Yeah, that absolutely makes sense from my point of view. And So I think if we move on and we look at decreasing prices, so we just expand upon why that can give a greater impact potentially. Again, we're still on the theory, right? But why that can be a greater impact potentially on your business than increasing prices. And I might stress that absolutely there's a certain amount of leading the witness here, as you can probably appreciate. But fundamentally, what we're trying to challenge is, regularly when people look at price optimization, there's a desire and an aspiration to increase prices, and this is potentially what we should have probably started before. I threw you right in the deep end and asked you what does pricing theory mean. But it really is, a lot of the initial questions that certainly we get asked is, hey, I'm really concerned about average margin. I want to protect average margin. I don't want to reduce prices. I want my price optimization exercises to increase prices. And what we've just touched upon is actually the theory, to a certain extent, in e-commerce anyway, actually, when you're initially doing a price optimization piece, because we'll come on to potentially what you do later as your pricing operation is more mature. But when you've got an immature pricing operation inside your organization, actually, we at BlackCurve, I challenge that aspiration, that business goal of, I want to protect margin, I want to grow margin, I want to increase prices, unless, as you say, and we'll come upon this later, that you're a growthy business and so forth, right?
So I'd add another thing into that. That's a human element, and I saw it's the same behaviour I saw in the city. It's a behavioural psychology element, and it's people love winners, right? So you want to find a product that's, if you're a product manager or pricing manager, you want to find products that are strongly independent of the market, so you can increase the price, and then you own that, and well done you, and pat yourself on the back. From both a stock picking and actually a portfolio management objective in general, I don't think it's a good strategy. And in pricing, the maths tells you it's not, because you're capped in effect by how much you can make per product. And sure, it might be sizable if you're shifting weight. If you're selling I should stop using London slang, but if you're selling a lot of the product, sure, an increase in that delta is a lot of money, and you should be doing it. But if you calculate the associated risk reward, and looking at and then couple in some other things like people's inventories tend to get more expensive over time rather than relative to the market, rather than less expensive on average, and all that kind of stuff. Suddenly, in that context, price decreases become a lot less risky. So the EV, I'm going to use this term a lot, but what I mean is that the kind of associated risk reward, the probability of it working multiplied by the outcome, is a lot higher for price decreases than price increases.
Yeah, and I think maybe if we come back to the human in that, I think certainly individuals that are responsible for pricing, I mean, even individuals that don't care about pricing in their day to day, right? They're not even in our profession. A lot of us like trophy hunting. We like to be, we like the concept of saying, hey, I found this trophy. I won this trophy. Or a lot of us love a bargain, right? A lot of us love free. And actually, if you identify products that you can increase the price of and maintain volume, that's free money. You'd previously left money on the table, and you've managed to extract more value from that exchange, right? And therefore, okay, we're pricing managers, we can brag about it, or so forth. And they're the things that everyone goes, holy cow, because you in our minds we go, that's brilliant, that's great.
And I think it's really important to note that I don't put this fault at the door of the pricing manager or the product manager. I put this at it's a systematic failure in businesses, especially larger ones, where if you want to get rewarded, if you want to get promoted, you have to point to examples of your achievement, right? And this is kind of bigger than pricing, I think, in terms of, and saying that like I shifted a portfolio in this way and explaining that actually we decreased net margin, but we dramatically increased net overall profitability. It's a much harder and subtler promotion case to get across, especially if there's a middle layer of management between you and leadership, rather than just saying, yeah, I picked these 5 products, they went through the roof, right? And it's that kind of, I think, general misunderstanding of statistics and statistical management that causes that kind of trophy hunting and ego, right? I mean, everyone loves winning. I'm the same, right? When you get something, you push product and it's live and it looks and it feels good and it works. It's like, I did this, and it's a really nice, tangible, positive feedback loop.
Yeah, and I think we've got to sometimes bow down to ego. I certainly, myself being a founder of a company, you've pulled me up a few times, have pulled me back down to earth with a bump, right? So I think I absolutely I can agree with that, because it's a harder sell internally, but it's easier to understand if you've increased prices. It's kind of one step of, right, I can see if you increase prices and maintain volume, I'm going to make more money. It's like easy, right? Whereas actually decreasing prices, to understand if it makes sense and it's effective, you've got to drill down a bit more further into the weeds to assess whether the impact
fundamentally has to understand the relationship between price and volume, which it may not, right? I mean, so I think you've hit on an even deeper reason, whereas increasing price equals more money, right? For a lot of people. We put our average margin's gone up across the board. Isn't that great? We can have the Rob rant on average margin as a metric another time, but like it's a simple metric that you can put in place to monitor business performance. Okay, if I assume volume's the same and everything's gone up, I'm making more money. Isn't that great?
And that's to a certain extent why a lot of businesses start out from a pricing operation doing a cost plus method of pricing, because you've got those safeguards in place. It gives you that comfort, and this to a certain extent is a step beyond. It's cost plus, but with a bit more, right? You're seeing if you can get away with a bit more. So okay, so I think we've wrestled the increasing prices. Shall we look at a bit more around the decreasing prices element? And I'd like to introduce the concept of time of a pricing operation, if I will. So for me, I'm hearing that if you decrease prices, you also have the opportunity to massively open up the taps in terms of a volume play. So you might take that hit on that individual product level in terms of the margin, the profitability of that individual product. But if the volume goes through the roof, opens up the taps, however you want to describe it, the sum of all the parts will be a bigger reward for you. Okay. Now, does that mean that all I need to do is just decrease my prices across the board, or is it kind of is it related to the stage with which a business is mature?
No, all of it is worth saying. All of this work only makes sense if your prices aren't optimized, right? That should be the massive rider across the top of this. We probably should have said it at the beginning, because if your price is in theory optimized, you're not changing your price unless the market changes.
That assumes a perfect market, though, right? So that assumes always a perfect market.
But so does price elasticity, right? So is it always better to decrease price? No. Should I continue to decrease price? No. I mean, what it is, it's about when I say it's better, less risky. It's like if I was to flip a coin on a product in the dark, should I increase the price or should I decrease the price? Is the EV on one better or the other? Is there a more likely, a better outcome on one than the other? But eventually, if you're doing it, this is kind of outside of the price, almost outside of the price optimization question, in terms of you should be using the knowledge you gain. Okay, so I go up and my profit drops, so I should go back down, and I should go down and my profit drops. All right, I'm actually at the right point. So both lost you profit, right? Both the increase and price decrease lost you profit. It's just that it is likely in that scenario that the price increase lost you more money because of the associated drop in volume than the price decrease. Right, so conversely, let's say that I'm too expensive and I go up and I'm still too expensive, so volume maintains, right? And I go down and volume increases. Because of the relationship between price and volume, it's likely that I made more money going going down because I just shifted a lot more units. And then if we take the third one and we're too cheap, and I go up, I make the corresponding change in price, volume maintains, fantastic. I go down, I lose the delta in price, but volume stays the same. So you can see out of those three scenarios, the first one where I'm optimized, price decrease loses me less money. The second one where I'm too expensive, that's likely, and we can go into the I think it's probably worth getting into like the rawness of real markets after this, but because some of that is creeping in this, but like it's likely that a price decrease makes me a lot more money than a price increase if I'm too expensive. And if I'm too cheap, the price increase makes me a little more money. Like, but no change, but no associated change in volume. So if you sum the three scenarios, the price decreases win, realistically.
So I think this kind of comes back to what we said about how mature you are as an operation, right? From a pricing perspective, that we're in the realms of price testing now, aren't we? We're describing an operation where you are price testing and seeing the result, and it's certainly worth saying that, and we've touched upon this in lots of other podcasts in the past, that you have to change price in order to learn. Okay, so actually, you can learn a lot by increasing the price, you can learn a lot by decreasing the price, and absolutely, to a certain extent, if you haven't changed price historically, you probably need a robust method to testing both directions, okay? Because you need to assess the resultant change in volume and see if price does influence the shifting of that product. So I think that's worth saying. And the reason that I think I was particularly interested in time is certainly, I don't know what you see with the case studies that you're involved in, Rob, is that a lot of the time, because there's only so many hours in the day, individuals are only focusing on making pricing decisions on a core part of their inventory, right? So, if we borrow good old 80-20 rule for a moment, right? 80% of your money comes from 20% of your products, okay, plus or minus, but we're doing rules of thumb here. So therefore, there might be long periods of time where you haven't even changed the price of your long tail at all. So therefore, you're not. You might be mature in your pricing operation for your core products, but you're not mature for your pricing operations across your whole entire inventory. Therefore, if you're suddenly going to open up the taps on a pricing optimization project, a business, generally speaking, if a product hasn't sold historically, you need to check whether that is to do with price. And therefore, what's the first move that you typically would do to test that? Is the assumption is that it's too expensive. That is one of the assumptions you can make. So what pricing move do you make? You make a price decrease. So that's why I'm introducing the concept of time, because if your pricing operation is not as mature, typically you've got more to gain from price decreases. Okay, so you would have a steady decrease in average margin. But as you learn more, as you do your pricing tests, you learn what price elasticity is, you learn what products, you do whatever you want with price and it doesn't have any change in volume. You learn all that, you do start to get into more of a steady state of maybe making fewer changes on certain products and so forth. And that's what I think, we're trying to be a bit controversial here, but actually a lot of operations aren't making price tests or aren't changing the price enough across their whole inventory. So when you're doing a price optimization exercise, absolutely, decrease the prices, you get more bang for buck there. But long term, it's about then monitoring it, fine tuning, and identifying the balance as you learn more. I think that's important. Do you agree or disagree with that statement, Rob?
No, I completely agree. It's if you're running a human pricing, like manual pricing or operation, and you've got thousands of products, you're only going to be able to focus on a few. And so, and then the emergent behavior or the natural behavior of that other set that you're not managing, they are likely to be too expensive because there's either no demand, or if price is a factor in demand, they're likely to be too expensive because you haven't looked at the market and the market has probably undercut them on average. Because you're not competitive on them by and large. And what that means is that if you start price optimizing, you're going to make a whole sweep of price decreases, like you said, and that's going to lead to a reduction in overall average margin, for example. Now, the interesting thing is it's really what you should be doing to understand that is segmenting your inventory into those separate products. Because you'll probably find that the ones you're on top of, if you put in some kind of price testing thing, you're probably pretty close to the money. Because you know your market, you know your products, you know what everyone else is doing, you know where you want to be positioned, right? And you've been doing that very nicely. So those will likely stay roughly the same. It's just that you might save a lot of time in automating that process realistically. And some of them you might be too cheap, interestingly, I think, because there can be a natural risk aversion. And then at the other end, suddenly you've basically taken a whole load of efficient products and made them efficient, which probably means shifting. I'm going to go the wrong way, but shifting the distribution to the left, right? Or making everything cheaper, because so you've got two options. Either there's no price isn't a factor in demand, in which case you go down, you test the price, you realize it, and you ping it back up, and you go and work out why it's not selling. Or price is, and then suddenly you start selling a load more at a reduced margin, so your net margin comes down. And this is where we go back into why average margin is a bad metric, because suddenly management panic because over my entire inventory, margin's been pulled down. Yeah, but our profitability's gone up because actually your margin target was based around your top set of your inventory, which you know well, not your bottom set of your inventory, which you know less well. Right?
And I think this is also the debate around, which is a whole nother series of questions of how do you treat pricing? Do you treat it at the micro product level, product decision level, or do you treat and win on that individual level? And to a certain extent, that's why people like price increases, because you can go trophy hunting on an individual level. Or do you treat a successful pricing operation that you win overall, that you make some mistakes, but you learn from those mistakes, and you treat the win based on your overall profitability of all of your product sets, or your overall revenue of all your product sets?
Yeah, all right. That is a. Can I say both? The issue, like if all your products existed in a vacuum, each product's in a vacuum, you could do the product level and not do and you would get the portfolio for free, right? The issue is that you have the interaction, cannibalization, blah 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 blah, between limited resources, limited PPC spend, all the rest of it. So you do need to have a real eye at the portfolio level, and it's not just. I think if you look certainly at the kind of pricing players, marketplace, us, but if you look at some of our competition as well, there is very much a focus on that to some degree. Some people are more into it than others. I won't go into talking about our competition, but there is a company that does it very well, and I like what they do in that space. And I think the way that they view pricing around setting it up at that really at that level, thinking about it as a holistic problem, is correct. I mean, I would, because it agrees with my view, but it's the same revolution that took place in the city out of the 80s, 90s, with the rise of kind of quant models and factor investing, and setting up portfolios with a specific aim and then winning on average. And then you don't win, you don't make a 10 million off one stock pick, but you do make that 10 million more consistently over 1,000 stock picks and drive everything up. And I think it's the same pricing. People thinking about pricing and the future of pricing should be thinking in that way for sure, because then you get to do all the fun stuff like layer in all your business constraints, right? You can start thinking about optimizing your PPC spend on your products and joining all that up together, or just time and resources, or adding new products to the mix and simulating what would happen. And I think that's really cool.
Yeah, I mean, I think those who those who know me personally and individually would sort of, I'm quite a pragmatic. I'm a very pragmatic person, right? I call a spade a spade. I'm not a whoopy person that's going to suddenly throw out, like, put my chest in the air and say, look at me, what I've done. And to a certain extent, to take your analogy a bit further, that's why I invest in funds over necessarily buying individual stock picks. And absolutely, I'm not going to be able to go in the office and say, hey guys, I bought Tesla at such and such and I've now made tons and tons of money, but I'm making sure I'm de-risking by doing a portfolio, investing in a fund that spreads your risk. And actually, that's why, I mean, we're going off a bit of a tangent here, but that's why I sort of like to treat pricing as looking at all of your products in your portfolio, spreading the risk, making educated mistakes to learn, and then learning from those, and also making educated right decisions based on what the historical data tells you. Because if you don't have historical data, you've got to make a decision, and it might be the wrong decision, but then you've learned from that decision. Okay, and this probably leads into why people would look to increase or decrease in the first place. It might be worth kind of touching upon some of those. I'll just throw some ideas out there to generate a bit of a debate. We've spoken at length about price testing. It might be worth adding, the reason for price testing is because if you haven't changed price historically enough, okay, you might be selling lots and lots of volume of this particular product, but if you haven't changed the price enough, you absolutely cannot work out price elasticity. So therefore, you still have no data, for want of a better word. So you've got to increase or you've got to decrease the price in order to work out, does a change in price equal an associated return in volume or variation of that. We've spoken at length about competitor pricing strategies. If you're maintaining parity, if your key competitors that you're tracking increase the price, and it is a market-driven product, increase the price. If it's a market-driven product and your core competitors decrease the price, probably you have to decrease the price of those particular products. One of the things that certainly I think a lot of the articles around how to increase your prices a lot of the time are in kind of service sectors or manufacturing of goods, and it's very easy to go, right, my costs have gone up, so therefore this is how you increase your prices and this is how you communicate them to your customer base. To a certain extent, if the price has gone up, like if it's harder logistically to get that product, especially in a lockdown situation, your costs have gone up. So there's an argument that your costs may go up. We've got the whole supply and demand piece, right? This is where we start. You're making decisions based off what your historical transactional data is telling you, so your demand, and therefore is there increased demand or less demand, and making an associated move on that. Alternatively, supply. I think Rob won a chocolate bar internally, although I've probably yet to send it. He called it back in, what was it, April, when we were talking about this, that retailers should avoid heavy discounting, right? Because they're going to have a supply problem, and therefore you need to make sure you hold on to that. You hold your nerve, you look at stock levels, you make decisions based off that. Now, it's very different from increasing your prices slightly because there's a supply chain problem, and price gouging, which is a no-no. And some retailers definitely yesterday, I won't name the name, but it was a major pharmaceutical company that I think had increased the product by 500 times, and it was a must-have necessity during the lockdown period. That's a no-no, but people appreciate if supply chains are under constraint. We know we're all in this situation together. We're not all working at home out of our own goodness, own heart.
Right, that is a interesting statement. I don't know how many people put two and two together on that. Interesting, just anecdotally, right?
Okay.
I know you do, and I know I do because we work in the space. But and I think for things like like things like groceries, probably, because okay, that makes sense. That's got to come from a field somewhere. But I think it was like hand sanitizer or something like that. I mean, the price gouging thing is always an interesting one, because part of me is like, well, if that's what the market's going to pay, that's what the market's going to pay, right? And suddenly you've gone up for, how often did you buy hand sanitizer before lockdown?
Not very often, if I'm honest.
Yeah, exactly, right? So I probably bought hand sanitizer once a month, once every couple of months, because I go fishing, and it's obviously a fairly useful thing to have. And so suddenly you go from that level of interaction to everyone wants to buy it right now and right then, and there isn't enough. And the issue is it is a medical product, right? And it's protecting you against something. But the other issue is there just isn't enough of it anyway, even if they could get it to you. I don't think people understand that relationship between supply and demand very well, because it's the same. Because I don't think people understand that there are people out there with a lot more money who can just pay for it, and
Yeah,
that's the unfairness,
true.
right?
But I mean, I think as a big data, absolutely, there are going to be people out there that would pay it, and probably the reason that they've kept the prices is because people are continuing to pay it. But I'm talking about more about the associated brand damage that you get from doing that, right? Because you might make a short term buck on it, but long term.
I'm with you. What I was actually contesting was the fact that people understood that, right?
No, that's fair. That's fair.
Because it's the same with football tickets. I mean, fundamentally, there's only a few thousand, so
yeah, it's true. Everyone complains about how much it costs to get a season ticket, but they're sold out every year, and people want to play, people want to go. Yeah. So to some extent, there's an argument to say it's right, but then you start, you unpick the layers of it's only available to the rich elite or only available to the people that can afford it, and you're not getting inclusivity and so forth. And I don't want to open up that can of worms for today, but I hear you.
We won't do BlackCurve on the free market.
I hear you. So we come back to just conscious of time. If we come back to the crux of the question, does the type or stage of business influence? So does that have any factor as to whether a price increase or a decrease should be? I mean, you touched upon a growthy business. What are your views on what should a growthy business do?
Well, if you're growing, well, the interesting thing is I think you should continue to optimize price and you should continue to price test. I think a growthy business, if you're in a growthy business, price is really unlikely to be driving your volume. It will be either your product mix or a brand or whatever, right? In which case you probably are better off just keeping the price the same or trying to increase slightly. Like, I mean, I think ASOS was probably a key example of what I would call a growthy business that got it wrong, because they were a growthy business, and then we've talked about them before, and they dropped their prices to price match, and then when growth stagnated, and then that didn't drive any more growth, and that's because it wasn't price that was driving your growth at all, and then actually there was nothing there to be gained, right? And then that's a situation where actually probably price decreasing is detrimental. I would almost say if you've got that much going on in your business and you're not sophisticated in your pricing operation, you probably shouldn't do anything. Just like set your prices, make sure you're competitive, and manage the huge amount of growth elsewhere, because you're going to be resource starved, right? Like,
well, also you've got the potential to have a lot of noise in the decisions.
There is no way you can unpick it, right? Yeah. I mean, I have people that know me and people that know BlackCurve will know that I have spent a lot of time trying to unwind this from a maths perspective, and you can do it. But if we get into, I think there's about 3 people in the company that understand why it works, right? And then I think there's about 1 client who understands why it works. And so because the level of sophistication you need to understand the argument and understand the assumptions going in, and then why the assumptions are roughly all right. I still think it's worth, what I'd probably say is that you still want to do the optimization, but you want to be making small price moves, right? I mean, realistically, if you're just like moving a % here or there, seeing what happens, then I think it will work fantastically, because you're building out your data set about your price elasticity as you go up the growth curve. And if it stables off, as these things do, right, you started to build out that data set on the way up for when more competitors enter the space, or price does become more of a determinator of value or growth.
But if you are growing, a price decreasing strategy at business level is probably, and you've already mentioned one, there's been some serious losers of having that as their strategy. Okay, so as we come up to the end, there are types of products which would dictate whether or not you increase or decrease the price at all. Do you think is it relevant?
Yeah, so this is the really, really interesting. This comes into the heavy discounting thing as well. In that for certain products, if you decrease the price, especially in a discount, but significantly for too long, people build up that association with the product or with the brand, right? So you actually, when I guess this was saying, when I say price decreases, I mean small ones, right? I don't mean big ones. I don't mean heavy discounting. We did a whole podcast on it, but like, because if we go back to, like, I don't know, you're selling handbags at $2,000 and you drop them down to $1,000, leave it long enough, that handbag is $1,000, right? You've devalued your brand across the board. And actually, in that kind of good, it's probably easier to make a price increase. I mean, look at Apple laptops. They can charge £1,000 for a stand, and then they can keep pushing and they keep pushing and they keep pushing. And I think they've finally reached a limit with the iPhone and gone back. But it took 10 years and 10 phones before they realised they had to go mid-market.
I don't know. I was having a chat with our seasoned chief revenue officer earlier yesterday, and he was saying, I spec'd an Apple laptop up the other day. It was $7,000. I was like, what have you put in it?
Notice I said phones, not laptops.
Yeah, but it also went, I was like, mate, you don't need that. What? Like, you're only doing PowerPoint. What are you?
I hope he listens to this.
Yeah, I'll tell him. I fast forward to minute whatever it is.
No. It's a test. We've now left it as a trap. So we know if he's listening to the podcast or not.
I like your style. Okay, so luxury goods, absolutely. You can seriously lose brand loyalty. And one of the success stories out there, I know that is it the Harvard School have done a case study on it. Is I think I've pronounced it terribly last time. Hermes, is it? Have I got it right this time? Have I?
Close.
We'll go with that. So they actually have always held their nerve, especially during periods of uncertainty, and they've kept a steady state of customers and actually grown it. Whereas other sort of luxury brands have sort of fallen into that discounting trap, and they've had to spend a long time rebuilding loyalty back into their customer base. So decreases in that respect has been harmful for those particular organizations.
Well, I mean, we covered this ourselves actually. This is one of the things that Charlie mentioned in a People of Retail post that we put out, was that, I mean, she's at PVH, which is Calvin and Tommy. Calvin Klein, Tommy Hilfiger, and it's that kind of brand. Price is a core brand value, right? In that, like, it's what sets you as premium. So it's not. So because even if you start discounting at the individual level, you can build in that association and devalue other stuff. I think it's going to be interesting in those businesses now. Demand has changed dramatically to see which of those survive and which of those don't, but that's a whole nother thing. But clearly for brands like that, price decreases are actually incredibly dangerous, and price increases are probably much less risky for luxury goods than, say, FMCGs, right, which is the space we normally work in.
Yeah, and maybe if we take the luxury out of it, maybe non-branded goods. You know, if you're trying to establish your brand, you know, you got to be wary. I think where price decreases have a potential to give more impact is, and where we see it more often, is on branded goods. I mean, there's a case study that I mentioned last week that I think is worth mentioning again, that their strategy is to grow their customer base and upsell their own brand goods. The way that they get foot traffic is by matching or undercutting their competitors of their branded goods. So they get them, people go onto their website and they say, oh, this is great, I can get this product for cheaper on this particular website. I didn't know about this website before. They buy that, they give them their email address. They've made a business decision objective to take a margin hit on branded goods and lower prices than they probably could actually get. But now they've got that person's email address, they can upsell their other products that you can't get elsewhere. And that's what I mean. But their own branded goods are actually, in this particular instance, were slightly more expensive, but then they had the opportunity to tailor the debate around quality, premium, only for the elite, and so forth, and that is powerful in itself. So it's branded, it's business objective, it's overarching strategy. There's a few pieces at play there. So as we come to the top of the hour there, Rob, is there anything that you'd like to add that you think we haven't covered? Any nuggets that you'd like to add? Normally at this point you say no, I'm done. Are you got any more for any more?
I don't think I need to pick any more fights.
Get my gloves out and a bit of a rocky.
No, I think we've largely covered it. I think a lot of it is worth noting that a lot of what we said applies to, like you say, more branded goods, FMCG kind of space, rather than luxury. I would argue that a lot of it does apply to unbranded goods. Actually, I would say it's almost more important because you don't quite know who your competitors are. So that price testing can be a really good way, or is the way of doing that when you can't get competitor coverage, which is when you kind of move outside of branded goods. I think that's it from me.
Okay, well, we'll summarize from there then. So we were answering the question, is it better to increase or decrease prices? And I think first and foremost, we'll go back to, you've got to work out what is your business objective. We'll look at what products you're selling and start from there. Because as we've touched upon, if you're a luxury business, when you're looking at price decreases, you've got to think honestly whether that's the right thing to do. But by and large, if you're an online player, you're selling a mix, you're selling kind of branded goods, and if your pricing operation isn't that mature, as in you haven't historically changed prices across your whole entire inventory and a regular enough frequency, the theory suggests that absolutely you've got more to gain by doing a price decrease, especially in the early days of a pricing optimization exercise. The reason for that is because if you increase the price of a product, typically your main hope is that you maintain volume or you only take a small drop in volume. And therefore, if you're looking for a profitability back, the delta between those two is going to be minimal. And if you're doing that across lots and lots of products, again, there's only so much that you're going to be able to sell. You're going to hit that glass ceiling. Whereas on the flip side, if you're decreasing the price of a product, generally speaking, that would open up the taps and the volume play comes in and you take that margin hit on individual products and overall you win because you're shifting a lot more units. And the reason that I say it depends on time and how mature your pricing operation is because generally speaking, retailers are focusing on a core part of their inventory. If you've got 1,000, 10,000 products, more than likely, if you look at yourself honestly, you're only changing price more frequently on 1,000 or 10, 20, 30% of your inventory. Therefore, you don't have data. You can't work out what the price elasticity is. Therefore, by and large, the initial assumption is that it's too expensive. So that first move is generally a price decrease. Now, I love what Rob said earlier, that I think people automatically assume price decreases is massive discounting or massive reductions in prices. That seems to be the association, definitely in e-commerce, when you're talking about decreasing prices. And I think something to stress, certainly from a BlackCurve perspective, what we believe in is that a price decrease can just be a nudge. It can be, a point of a decimal, can be a percentage point, but it's a minor movement. You're prodding the bear, you're poking the bear, you're seeing if you're getting a reaction. It's the test and learn. We're not talking about massive decreases. So don't panic, Mr. Mannering. We're not suggesting heavy discounting here when we're talking about price decreases. So thank you very much for listening. This is E-commerce Matters. We're available on all major podcasting platforms, brought to you by BlackCurve. We help e-commerce businesses make pricing decisions. Take care. See you next time.